Welcome dear students. মই আজি ক্লাস 10 নেলসন মান্ডেলা লং ওয়াক টু ফ্রিডম নামৰ পাঠটিৰ কোৱেশ্চন আনসাৰবোৰ লৈ আহিছো। প্ৰথমে মই আৰম্ভ কৰিছো পেজ নম্বৰ 18 ৰ প্ৰশ্নসমূহ। Question number 1. Where did the ceremonies take place? Can you name any public buildings in India that are made of sandstone? Answer. The ceremonies took place in the Union Buildings Amphitheatre in Pretoria. Rashtrapati Bhavan and Red Fort are two public buildings in India that are made of sandstone. Question number 2. Can you say how 10 May is an autumn day in South Africa? Answer. The inauguration ceremony took place on 10 May. People of different colors and nations, including politicians and dignitaries, celebrated the ceremony together with joy as South Africa's first democratic non-racial government was formed. So, we can say that 10 May is an autumn day in South Africa. Question number 3. At the beginning of his speech, Mandela mentions an extraordinary human disaster. What does he mean by this? What is the glorious human achievement he speaks of at the end? Answer. At the beginning of his speech, Mandela mentions an extraordinary human disaster, and by this he means the practice of apartheid that lasted too long in South Africa, where blacks were treated brutally by the whites. The glorious human achievement he speaks of at the end means the end of apartheid, as after more than 3 centuries of white rule, the people of South Africa were now free from all kinds of suffering and discrimination. Question number 4. What does Mandela thank the international leaders for? Answer. The inauguration ceremony was attended by politicians and dignitaries of different countries. Mandela thanks them for having come to support and stand with the people of South Africa, which is common victory for justice, peace, and human dignity. Question number 5. What ideals does he set out for the future of South Africa? Answer. Mandela became the first black president as the democratic elections were held in 1994. They achieved their political freedom, and Mandela sets out the ideals to liberate all their people from the continuing bondage of poverty, deprivation, suffering, gender, and other discrimination. Page number 21, question number 1. What do the military generals do? How has their attitude changed, and why? Answer. The military generals of South African Defence Force saluted Mandela and pledged their loyalty, who would not have saluted but arrested him before. Their attitude has changed because after the democratic elections, a new non-racial government was formed and Mandela was elected their president. Question number 2. Why were 2 national anthems sung? Answer. On the day of inauguration, 2 national anthems were sung so that both the blacks and whites would soon know the words by heart, though once they hated each others. It showed the equality of blacks and whites. Next question. How does Mandela describe the systems of government in his country in the first decade and in the final decade of the 20th century? Answer. Mandela describes that in the first decade of the 20th century, the white people of South Africa set up the most inhuman system of racial domination against the blacks of their own land. Mandela mentions that in the last decade of the 20th century, that system has been overturned forever and replaced by one that recognized rights and freedoms of all peoples regardless of the color of their skin. Question number 4. What does courage mean to Mandela? Answer. To Mandela, courage means not the absence of fear, but it means triumph over fear. He says, the brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. Question number 5. Which does he think is natural, to love or to hate? Answer. Mandela thinks that love comes more naturally to human heart than hate, because no one is born hating another person because of the color, background and religion. Page number 24. Question number 1. What twin obligations does Mandela mention? Answer. Mandela mentions that every man has twin obligations. They are obligations to his family, parents, wife and children, and obligations to his people, community and his country. In a civilized society, each man is able to fulfill those obligations according to his own abilities. Question number 2. What did being free mean to Mandela as a boy and as a student? How does he contrast these transitory freedoms with the basic and honorable freedoms? Answer. To Mandela, the meaning of freedom was running, swimming, riding and roasting maize without any trouble when he was a boy. As a student, Mandela wanted transitory freedoms to stay out at night, to read whatever he liked and to go where he chose. But as a young man, Mandela discovered that his boyhood freedom was an illusion, and he yearned for the basic and honorable freedoms of earning, marrying and having a family without any obstruction in a lawful life. Question number 3. Does Mandela think the oppressor is free? Why not? Answer. Mandela thinks that the oppressor is not free. A man who takes away another man's freedom is a prisoner of hatred and anger, who is locked behind the bar of prejudice and narrow-mindedness. The oppressor and the oppressed are robbed of their humanity. Next question. Why did such a large number of international leaders attend the inauguration? What did it signify the triumph of? Answer. Due to the policy of apartheid, many countries had earlier broken off diplomatic relations with South Africa. But after the democratic elections, Mandela became the president of South Africa and the policy of apartheid was replaced, for which a large number of international leaders attended the ceremony to show their support for South Africa and to celebrate their ceremony, which was a new step towards a new society. It signifies the triumph of justice, peace, and human dignity over discrimination. Question number 2. What does Mandela mean when he says he is simply the sum of all those African patriots who had gone before him? Answer. By saying this, Mandela refers himself as simply the sum of all those African patriots who had gone before him, because South African people got freedom through the sacrifices, struggles and sufferings of those patriots whose whose suffering and courage can never be repaid. Mandela was pained that he was not able to thank them for their sacrifices. Next question. Would you agree that the depths of oppression create heads of character? How does Mandela illustrate this? Can you add your own examples to this argument? Answer. Yes, I agree that depths of oppression create heads of character. The brutality of apartheid system created a deep and lasting wound in South Africa and its people, for which a lot of strong and courageous people like Oliver Tambo, Walter Sisulu, Dadus, and Subaki were produced, who stood up and raised their voice against the apartheid system. We can add here the examples of Indian freedom fighters. India was under British rule for about 200 years, and their oppression created freedom fighters like Bhagat Singh, Kushal Kaur, Konaklata, etc., who sacrificed their lives in the long freedom movement. Question number 4. How did Mandela's understanding of freedom change with age and experience? Answer. Mandela's understanding of freedom changed with his age and experience. He mentioned that as a boy he was free to run, swim, play, and whatever he wanted to do, abiding by the customs of his tribe. As a student, he wanted freedom only for himself. Later, as a young man, he yearned for the basic and honorable freedoms of earning, marrying, and having a family without any obstruction in a lawful life. Then slowly he realized that not only his freedom but the freedom of all his people was taken away by the whites. Question number 5. How did Mandela's hunger for freedom change his life? Answer. Mandela was not born with a hunger for freedom, but slowly he realized that the freedom of all black people was taken away by the whites. That time he joined the African National Congress to fight for the freedom of his countrymen. His desire to fight for the freedom changed young, frightened Mandela into a bold man who stood up against the whites. Thus his hunger for his own freedom became the greater hunger for the freedom of his people. মৰমৰ ছাত্ৰ ছাত্ৰীসকল, আমাৰ ভিডিঅ'টো ইমানতে শেষ হৈছে। আশা কৰোঁ তোমালোক উপকৃত হ'বা। ধন্যবাদ।